Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Jackson Hole is a valley surrounded by majestic mountains, including the Teton Range to the west and the Gros Ventre Range to the east. Native peoples, including the Shoshone and Arapaho tribes, have lived in this area for centuries. It's located just south of Yellowstone National Park, which occupies the northwest corner of the state of Wyoming, as well as parts of Montana and Idaho. Today, Jackson Hole is a popular destination for outdoor enthusiasts, nature lovers, and adventure seekers. On the show today, we will chow down on a hearty Chuckwagon Supper and explore the art of fly fishing and the science of whitewater rafting. We'll delve into the conservation of gray wolves, investigate the geology of the Tetons, and examine the how-tos of horseback riding. So here's to a twice as good taste of Jackson Hole. Rapids are created by fast-moving water flowing over rocky or uneven terrain. Class 1 rapids are characterized by smooth, flat water with minimal obstacles and are generally suitable for beginners. Class 2 rapids contain small waves, require some maneuvering, and are typically suitable for novices with basic paddling skills. Class 3 rapids have moderate obstacles, require more advanced maneuvering, and are suitable for intermediate paddlers comfortable with strong currents. Class 4 rapids can have large waves and significant obstacles that require precise and skilled maneuvering, and consequently are suitable for advanced paddlers with extensive whitewater experience. Class 5 rapids are extremely difficult rapids with large waves which require expert-level skill and precision to navigate. Class 6 rapids are thought of as unrunnable rapids that pose an extreme danger to even the most experienced paddlers. The Snake River runs through Jackson Hole and, as Bud Chatham explains, offers some of the best whitewater rafting in the world. How did the Snake River get its name?
Basically, it was a miscommunication that the early explorers had with the Native Americans that were in the area. So they were trying to ask the Shoshone tribe, what do you call this river? And the Shoshone tribes, they basically communicated with hand signs. And so they used this motion right here to describe the river. But really, the single meant river of many fish.
Why are some parts of the river whitewater versus others are calm?
It's basically because there isn't much of an elevation change. It's, braided. It's like spilling water on a table. What happens as we move further south is that the Gros Ventre Range and the Wind River Range and Snake River, Wyoming Range kind of converge and funnel the water down into the Snake River Canyon. And that's where we get our elevation drop. And that changes the gradient of the river bottom and speeds up the flow of the water. And then what happens with that is that you get a bunch of eddies and boils, waves and rapids. Because basically the water is just trying to fill all the holes as everything gets funneled into one big channel.
So as you look downstream, how do you know whether the water is shallow or deep?
You can tell it from the different changes in the tint of water. So if the water is a little lighter, typically the water is shallower. When the water is a little like a deeper color, it usually means it's deeper. But on a day like today, or if the sun isn't shining and it's cloudy, a lot of times like that, you don't have that. So you gotta look at kind of the top of the water to see what it looks like.
So when the river bends, how do you decide whether to go right or left?
You want to stay on the inside of the bend typically. It's called cutting the sea. A lot of times too, you'll have one bend and then another bend, which is like an S-turn. When you're on the inside of the bends, that's where you have the current is its slowest. On the outside of the bends, that's where it really picks up speed. And when it picks up speed on the outside of bends, that's also where you'll have like your rock ledges out there. So if you stay on the inside, then you have more time to kind of see your line, and then you can kind of choose where you want to go.
Horses are majestic creatures, and while you can probably identify their ears and their tail, there are many lesser-known terms used to identify their anatomy. A few of the more interesting ones include barrel, the middle of the horse, where the ribcage is located; fetlock, Sometimes called a horse's ankle, the fetlock is actually more like the ball of the foot on humans. Hock, the joint on the hind leg of a horse that acts like a human ankle. Muzzle, the part of the head that comes out of a horse's face, including the jaw, mouth, and nose. Poll, the back part of a horse's head. Withers, the highest part of the back of a horse, behind the neck and between the shoulders. Danny Robinson with Teton Village Trail Rides will take the reins and teach us the how-tos of riding. How do you groom and then tack up a horse?
Well, in the mornings, we want to make sure that all of the parts that are covered by the saddle are clean. And so we'll take what's called the curry comb and we'll brush out any dirt and mud and stuff like that on their back first. And then down here on their belly where the cinch is going to go, we make sure that's clean. Anything else is just cosmetic.
Can you take us through the parts of the saddle?
So a breast collar goes here, and then you work up here. This is your saddle horn, pommels underneath. Your forks come down. There's buck rolls here. These are so if you're starting to get bucked off, you can hook your legs underneath and hang on. Down through here, you've got your skirting, your stirrup leathers. Obviously, your stirrups are here. Your front cinch, which is your main cinch, or girth is what some people call it. You have saddlebags. This is a back cinch. It's not absolutely essential, but in a Western saddle, you'll see it quite a bit.
Can you tell us about the difference between a walk, a trot, and a canter?
Yeah, so a walk is kind of self-explanatory. That's when the horse is just moving along like they want to. A trot's like when you're out for a jog, and so they're gonna move a little faster, and it's a little bumpier for the rider. Your canter would be more of like what we'd call like a slower lope.
Can you show us how to properly mount him?
Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna keep my reins in one hand, and I'm gonna come over to my left stirrup. I also grab onto his mane as I'm getting on, okay? And I have one hand usually I put on the back of the cantle. So I go left foot, mane. Then once you're on top, you make sure you always have your reins in your hand all the time. You have your heels down, and then you're ready to ride. You're gonna hold your reins in one hand, okay? So if I ever need to steer my horse, I'm gonna put my hand out here over the horse's neck. I'm gonna go left if I need to go left, right if I need to go right, okay? And then if I need to stop, I'm gonna pull straight back, and then once he stops, I'm gonna ease up, because if I keep pulling back, I go in reverse.
Second half of the 19th century, trail crews depended on chuckwagons to keep them fed during long cattle drives. The main body, or wagon box, typically made of wood, has a canvas top that can be rolled up or down depending on the weather. The chuck box is a cabinet located on the back of the wagon box where the cook stores food and cooking utensils. A large water barrel with an access spigot is typically mounted on the side of the wagon box to hold water for cooking and drinking. The cook would typically use cast iron pots, pans, and skillets to prepare meals over an open fire. Michael Goralski, executive chef of the Four Seasons Resort in Jackson Hole, prepares signature Wyoming dishes that put a dazzling modern twist on the Chuckwagon Supper tradition. And the perfect example of this is this elk chili bowl.
We're gonna add a little oil to get the elk meat nice and brown. Then we're gonna take the elk meat, put it into our nice hot cast iron pan, and we're gonna chop it up so the elk meat is leaner than chicken and beef, so it's much healthier for you. You can add 1 cup onions along with the green bell peppers. This is for texture, color, and flavor. And we want to use vegetables that are denser, that will hold up for our braising techniques that last when you simmer the chili for up to 2 to 3 hours. And we're gonna add half of our seasoning. Inside our chili mix, we have guajillo pepper, cayenne pepper, paprika, cumin, sugar, and salt. Now we'll add our black beans, give that a quick stir, and then we'll add our tomato product, and then we'll stir that up, get it all mixed up nice. Now that it's stirred together and incorporated, we're gonna cover it up and let it simmer for 2.5 hours.
Why was the Dutch oven so important to the chefs?
It's built of cast iron and it's very sturdy. They could use it over a fire pit or dug into the ground and buried into a fire pit to cook longer, simmering stews and such.
So can you tell us what types of foods they would generally make?
They usually use salted pork or smoked dry beef, baked beans, dried fruit, rice, but some of their favorite ingredients to finish off the day, obviously, or start it, was coffee.
What were the chef's roles in day-to-day life? And did they have any special nicknames?
They did. One of their special nicknames was known as Cookie, is what their name was, yes. And they were actually second in charge next to the trail boss. And not only did they cook for the cattle herders, but they were the banker for everybody's money. He was the barber and also had the privilege of pulling all the teeth as being the dentist.
So it's safe to say that the cooks are pretty important.
This is true, yes. I think it's time to dig in. Let me pour you some elk chili.
And then you get to put all the garnishes on there
Yes,
too.
then we'll put the sour cream, scallions.
Good for some nice color there.
Yep, and some white cheddar cheese. And we'll top it off with our cheddar cheese scallion biscuits. Why don't you have a taste and enjoy it?
Wow, this tastes so warm and cozy. Thank you so much for teaching us how to make this amazing chili.
Well, it's a pleasure and I hope you enjoyed it.
Fly fishing is a form of angling that uses a lightweight, artificial fly to entice fish to bite. The lures are called flies because they look like, well, flies, or the small insects that sit on the water's surface, which attract fish. The art of fly fishing requires patience, skill, and a deep understanding of the natural environment. Anglers must read the water and the movements of fish in order to cast their fly in just the right spot and create a realistic impression of the movement of an insect. There's no one better to cast our lot in with and learn the art of fly fishing from than expert fly fisher Jason Below. What are your favorite fly patterns and what kind of fish can you catch with them?
So around here we fish a lot with stonefly patterns. Stonefly is a bug that was left over from the dinosaur age. And they're big. We can fish them on the surface so you can watch a fish come up and eat it like this.
Cool.
Yeah, no, so it's pretty
so
engaging
cool.
that way, yeah.
What exactly are flies made of?
Well, there's all kinds of materials. I just found some elk hair. This particular fly would be one of those stonefly patterns, and we might use that for the wing on here. We use natural materials, but also synthetic materials. This is foam, so it'll float.
So do you use the same fly for every fish, or do you change it up?
I'll change it up based on the conditions that are presented. Fly fishing is very situational, so I'll come to a river and kind of look around if I see any bugs, and then I'll try to imitate those bugs. Hold it on the grip, and then I put my thumb up the grip and come up quick to a stop, and then forward to a stop. The fish are gonna hold in the current like this, but the current brings food to them. It takes a little while to learn the art. That casting motion, the mend, and the mend is a semicircle in the air on the rod tip. We're literally just placing the line behind the fly. And then if they eat it, we do what's called a hook set, which is actually lifting your arm, and I call it the Statue of Liberty. Come up quick, we do our mend, and then out here. And then when it gets to there, this is where we would make a new cast. There you go. Boom, nice. Patience is key. It brings you into that moment. I think it's an art that is inherent in all of us. We just have to reconnect with it.
With its vast open spaces and low light pollution, Wyoming offers some of the darkest and clearest night skies in the country, providing an ideal location for stargazing. The Milky Way is often visible, and shooting stars can frequently be seen darting across the sky. Astronomer Ryan Hennessy is the perfect Jackson Hole stargazing galaxy guide. So what makes the stargazing in Jackson Hole so amazing?
Well, it is a beautiful place. Jackson Hole is one of the most beautiful places in the world, and in particular, famous for its natural landscape, but famous for its views of the sky as well. We're right at the southern edge of Grand Teton National Park, a place where there's no development. It's really dark, and that means that things that might be really hard to see, say if you're in a big city with a lot of light pollution, are much easier to see out here. We can see all the details of various constellations. We can see the beautiful sweep of the Milky Way. There's just so much more that we can see and that we can see clearly here in Jackson Hole. Right above us right now, we're going to be looking at the Big Dipper. An asterism, which is what the Big Dipper is a grouping of stars that we kind of recognize as a thing. It's recognizable and helps us orient ourselves in the night sky. As the Earth turns every day, we take a 360-degree spin around its own axis. It means that we're rotating towards the east. It means that we see about a degree more of the eastern sky every day and a degree less of the western sky every day. So the sky, as we see it, as we look up in the sky, it's going to be a different sky tomorrow or the next week or the next month.
How far away are these stars?
Our galaxy, the Milky Way, our collection of at least 100 billion stars, it's about 100,000 light years across. So that means if you were to turn on a flashlight, say, at one end of the Milky Way, it would take 100,000 years for that light to get all the way across. Astronomers use the word light year all the time, and it's because the distances are so huge. It just doesn't make sense to talk about kilometers or miles when the distances are so enormous. A light year is the distance that light travels in a year. It's about 6 trillion miles. There's bound to be stars that don't even exist anymore, though we can see the echoes of their light coming to us from those great distances.
Over billions of years, the landscape around what is now Jackson Hole was shaped by natural forces like glaciers, erosion, and earthquakes. Towering over this valley is the Teton Range, which contains some of the oldest rocks in North America, even though it is a young mountain range. Aaron Campbell, the Wyoming State Geologist and Director of the Wyoming State Geological Survey, is an expert on the formation of the Tetons.
The oldest rocks in the Teton Range are about 2,700,000,000 years old.
Wow, that's amazing.
And they are metamorphic rocks, which form when older rocks have been exposed to extreme temperature and pressure. You can identify them here in the Teton Range because they'll have layers of light and dark colored rocks, could be pink or black or white or brown, and they'll often have folds in those layers. This is a metamorphic rock similar to the oldest rocks in the Tetons. Would you mind pouring some water on there to help us see the layers?
You can see all of the colors, the pink and the black.
Those are layers of different minerals. Major continent-continental collision occurred that created enough heat and pressure that we could fold solid rock.
Can you tell us about some of the other rocks that can be found in the Tetons and how they were formed?
There are also igneous and sedimentary rocks in the Tetons. Igneous rocks form from the cooling of magma, and if that happens underground, it cools slowly and becomes something like granite. If it's erupted at the surface, it cools quickly and becomes something like volcanic rocks or lava. In fact, the highest peaks in the Tetons are made of granite that is 2,500,000,000 years old.
The Tetons are said to be the youngest range in North America. Can you tell us how they formed?
They formed about 9 to 10 million years ago by movement along the Teton Fault. And so the fault is dipping towards us, and the block underneath the fault moved up, forming the Teton Mountains, and the block on top of the fault moved down, forming this valley floor. The fault slid like this, so the block below the fault lifted up, and that's the Teton Range, and the block on top of the fault down dropped, and that is the valley where we're standing. And in fact, there are sedimentary rocks on top of the Tetons that are about 500,000,000 years old, and those same rocks are found below our feet. And so the difference from the top of the mountain to the 24,000 feet below us is 30,000 feet. So the mountains have been uplifted 30,000 feet.
And is the Teton fault line still active?
It is. In fact, the Tetons are rising about 1.1 millimeters per year, which doesn't sound like much, but over 100 years, that's about 4 inches that the Tetons are rising.
Long ago, wolf packs roamed from the Arctic tundra to Mexico. But by the early 1900s, they were no longer found in most of the United States. In 1973, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service listed the northern Rocky Mountain wolf as an endangered species and designated the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem as one of 3 recovery areas. Between 1995 and 1997, 41 wild wolves were released into Yellowstone, where they thrived. Seth Ames is a naturalist guide and an expert on the wolves in Yellowstone and the impact that they've had on the park over the last 25 years.
How many wolves live in a typical pack?
In Yellowstone, the typical pack size is about 12 wolves, which is higher than the average of the world.
And how many packs are in Yellowstone today?
In Yellowstone, we have 10 packs and about 108 wolves in those packs.
So how does pack life help them survive and thrive?
Pack life teaches the young ones how to hunt, how to defend their territory, and how to live in general.
And how does their hunting affect other animals in the park?
When elk started to be hunted by wolves, the elk had to move out of the areas where it was very wet because they were exposed to predation. And so whenever they moved out of those swampy areas, out of those marshy areas, beavers came in and increased the biodiversity in those areas by letting other animals thrive in the wet habitats.
Is the wolf population decreasing?
Right now, it's stable. It's been stable since 2009. There's about 80 to 120 wolves in Yellowstone year to year.
Can you tell us about the difference between gray wolves and black wolves?
Black wolves and gray wolves, they're the same species, but the black wolf actually is a genetic hybrid from when wolves bred with domestic dogs from Native Americans.
And can you tell us about the expression wolfing down one's food?
Well, a wolf can actually eat 20% of its body weight in one sitting. So I'm 200 pounds, and imagine if I ate 40 pounds of food in one sitting.
It's a lot of food.
I would be wolfing down food.
In 1912, Congress set aside lands for the establishment of a winter game, elk reserve in Wyoming. Today, the National Elk Refuge protects the migratory patterns for the elk and provides a habitat for many other native species found here, including bison, wolves, trumpeter swans, bald eagles, bighorn sheep, and cutthroat trout. Carrie Siskowitz of the National Elk Refuge is an expert on the migration of the elk and the wildlife of the refuge.
So what part of the year do the elk come here?
So elk start making their way down to the National Elk Refuge usually between October and December. It just depends how much snow is in the mountains. That's what pushes them down to lower elevations.
Can you tell us a bit more about their migration patterns?
So they migrate based on the weather. And so in the summer months, they're high up in the mountains feasting on all that greenery that grows up there. And then as snow starts to collect in the autumn and early winter, they get pushed down to lower elevations because they need access to food. So they make their way down to lower elevations where they remain here during the winter.
How many elk do you get here each year?
We can have anywhere between 7,000 and 8,000 elk on the refuge in the winter.
And how big do these elk get once they're fully grown?
They can get quite large. So the cow elk, which are the female elk, can be anywhere from 500 to 600 pounds. While the males, or the bull elk, they can reach weights of over 1,000 pounds.
Wow. Can you tell us about chronic wasting disease and how that affects them?
So chronic wasting disease is a disease that can be found within the Cervidae family, which is the deer family. So it can be found in elk, moose, mule deer, and white-tailed deer, all of which are found on the refuge. And there's no cure to this disease, and once it's spread and an elk has it, or another member of the deer family has it, it's fatal.
What does the future of the elk population look like?
That's a great question. So populations of all different animals are dynamic and they respond to different environmental conditions. So we're going to continue to monitor these animals, continue to provide them with rich habitat, and continue to assess their successes on the refuge.
It sounds like such a special project.
It's really fun.
Bone Wars were a period of intense competition between Othniel's Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope. The rivalry between the two began in the late 1800s. Both Marsh and Cope were obsessed with discovering as many new species of dinosaurs as possible. And their rivalry led them to push the boundaries of ethical and scientific behavior. They were accused of employing spies, sabotaging each other's excavations, and bribery and theft, all in the name of maximizing their named discoveries. Despite their seemingly unscrupulous behavior, Marsh and Cope both made significant contributions to the field of paleontology. with Marsh discovering the legs of Stegosaurus and Cope credited with the discovery of Triceratops. The quality of bones collected during the Bone Wars formed the foundation of American paleontology.
Jackson Hole's location by Yellowstone Park at the base of the Tetons makes it the perfect location to explore the art of fly fishing and the science of whitewater rafting.
Its vast openness allows Jackson Hole's inhabitants to teach the how-tos of horseback riding, the astronomy of stargazing, and the importance of conservation of those animals with which it shares this special place.
There's no doubt that Jackson Hole is twice as good.